Hi, I'm Mrs. Gooding, and today I'm going to show you how to do some research in Discus using a research guide, a research grid. It's also a guide to help you think through the main ideas of what it is you're researching and put it into a really simplistic form for you to be able to use when writing a paper or creating a project based on your research. So the first thing I had to do was I had to find a topic that I'm going to research. Well, the topic was made very easy for me because I know that some of you are doing the Odyssey, reading the Odyssey in English 1, and so one of the topics with the Odyssey is an epic poem. And I really didn't know anything or very much about an epic poem, so I thought that would be a great thing for me to research since I don't really know very much about it. Well, as I take a look at the research grid, the very first thing I'm going to do is fill out the main points of the research grid. So I know that my topic is the epic poem. I'm going to put my name in here, Mrs. Gooding. Today's date is September the 26th. And I know that I'm only going to be doing some online research through Discus. So I'm not going to worry about reading books at this point. I purposefully know that I want to use Discus. So now once I've got this information filled out, it's time to go to Discus. And I already have pulled up the article that I'm going to be using, and you'll see that it's called Epic. And so I now need to spend some time reading through and finding out some information that's going to help me be able to read the Odyssey and figure out what an epic poem is. So as I look at the first paragraph, I see here in the second sentence it says, most epics are legendary tales about the glorious deeds of a nation's past heroes. The term originally referred to long narrative poems of heroic deeds among ancient peoples. So the very first thing that I want to put into my research grid is the definition of epic. And based on what I read, I know that the definition of an epic poem is it's a poem about heroes. Okay, so I need to kind of think a little bit more about that. You know, when I think about heroes, modern day heroes, kind of what we have, I go back to the article and I see, oh, what does it mean for today? Okay, so I see that by today's standards, an epic poem might refer to a book or motion picture that deals in a grand way with significant historical events. Well, after this, they do give me some examples. They give me the example of War and Peace and Gone with the Wind, which are good examples, but, you know, a little antiquated for me, a little bit old for me. I would like to think that I'm not very old, and so therefore, I need to try to make a connection. And my connection of an epic, modern-day epic poem or tale or movie is the Titanic. Because when I think of the Titanic, I think of the historical events that went with the movie, but also the heroes that were involved in the movie as well. Okay, so now I've got two of my boxes filled out. I've got to keep going, so I'm going to come back to the article. I'm going to go to the second paragraph. And I see that this paragraph is loaded with lots of information that I need to know about an epic poem. It talks about how they're used in all parts of the world to transmit traditions from one generation to another. They can deal with topics such as legends, histories, religious tales, animal stories, or moral theories. And so I'm thinking about what that means, and I see these stories are passed from one generation to the next by storytellers long before they were actually written. So I feel that that's a very important piece that I need to have in my research grid, and I know that this is a story told from generation to generation. Notice that as I'm filling out this grid, I do not need to write incomplete sentences. I'm just getting my thoughts in order. I also know that they were oral stories because many times written language was not available at that time, and they're told by storytellers. So this is a really important piece of information for me to know when dealing with reading the Odyssey, because I know that even though some of the things in the Odyssey are very unrealistic, it's because of the fact that they've been told, you know, from generation to generation, and details I know will sometimes change from generation to generation, and that's how stories come to be. Okay, now the other thing that I need to take a look at in regards to the storytelling is the purpose of the epic, which is this paragraph right here. Okay, and it specifically says the purpose of the epic was to educate and inspire one generation of people to value and follow the deeds of their larger-than-life predecessors. So that's a huge piece that goes into this generation-to-generation storytelling. So I now want to go back to my research grid, and I want to put the purpose of the epic. And the purpose of the epic was to inspire future generations. I think the peoples wanted their young children to follow the examples of these larger-than-life heroes, and so that's why they kept telling the stories and had hopes that they would then create more heroes among each of the following generations. Okay, so now the last piece that I'm missing as I'm starting to fill out my grid is that I still haven't quite touched on the Odyssey yet. So I need to come back to the article, and I see right here it goes into some detail about epics, but what catches my eye is this right here, this first sentence in this paragraph. Best known are the great Greek epics by Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. It says the Iliad is the story of the Trojan War, and the Odyssey deals with the 10-year voyage of Odysseus to his home after the war. So I know now to come back to my grid, I'm really looking at the Greek epics because I know we're going to be reading the Odyssey. And with the Greek epics, I know we have the Iliad and the Odyssey. And so now I've got to think about and maybe build some background knowledge on the Iliad so that the Odyssey will make a little bit more sense. Now, that's not my job on the grid. I don't need to go back into the article just to get some background information on the Iliad. I can do that a little bit later because right now I'm only concerned about what an epic poem really is. So you can see I've pretty much filled out my research grid, and I don't really need, as I look through the article, any more information for epic poetry. So now, because I'm finished with reading the article, I need to cite my source, and this is where Discus comes in, is a wonderful resource, because up here in this menu bar where I have the check mark in the box, this will actually allow me to cite my source, and you can see that it will give me citation styles. Here at Gilbert, we do the MLA style, and down here is my citation. I can cut and paste that into notes and then embed it into my report or my project. I can handwrite it. I can do it many different ways. And you can see that if what you want to do is handwrite it, you can just go ahead and add it to the bottom of your research grid. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the information that I've collected in the research grid, and I'm going to use it to create some sort of a project, whether it be a paper, whether it's a keynote, whether it's an iMovie, some sort of informational piece that I can share with other people so that I can explain to them what an epic poem is in case they don't know as well.